He was the richest man in Rome, a political titan who stood shoulder to shoulder with Julius Caesar and Pompey the Great. But Marcus Licinius Crassus had a deep-seated insecurity. He lacked the one thing that commanded ultimate respect in the Republic: military glory. This burning obsession would lead him to march an army of over 40,000 men straight into a death trap, masterminded by an enemy he fatally underestimated. This is the story of how one man's ego caused one of the most catastrophic defeats in Roman history, a blunder that would help tear the Republic apart. Back in 55 BCE, the Roman Republic was effectively run by three men in an alliance called the First Triumvirate. You had Pompey the Great, a celebrated general. You had Julius Caesar, whose brilliant campaigns in Gaul were already the stuff of legend. And then you had Marcus Licinius Crassus. Crassus was unbelievably, almost incomprehensibly, wealthy. But his path to power wasn't paved with battlefield victories. He made his fortune on real estate deals and by profiting from political purges. And while he had successfully put down the famous slave revolt of Spartacus, he felt Pompey had unjustly stolen the spotlight for the final victory. In the hyper-competitive world of Roman politics, this mattered. He had money and influence, but he didn't have the gravitas that came from foreign conquest. He didn't have a legacy to rival his partners. This gnawing insecurity bred a dangerous ambition. While Caesar was in Gaul and Pompey was governing Spain, Crassus was appointed governor of Syria, a province bordering the vast and wealthy Parthian Empire. To the Romans, Parthia was an unknown quantity, a land of riches just waiting to be taken. For Crassus, it was the perfect opportunity. He would not be outshone. He would invade Parthia, conquer it, and return to Rome dripping in gold and glory, finally cementing his place as an equal to Caesar and Pompey. This wasn't a war demanded by the Senate. It was a war of choice, born of pure ego. While Crassus, as proconsul, had the legal authority for a border campaign, this invasion was not formally sanctioned as a state-declared war. It was a personal quest for glory, and it would set the stage for a military disaster of epic proportions, proving that in war, arrogance can be a far deadlier enemy than any army. In 53 BCE, Crassus marched his massive invasion force toward Parthia, 7 legions plus cavalry and light infantry, totaling somewhere between 36,000 and 43,000 men. It was a conventional Roman army, a hammer designed to crush anything in its path with disciplined close-quarters combat. As he advanced into Mesopotamia, his most important ally, King Artavasdes II of Armenia, rode into his camp. Artavasdes gave him sound advice and a generous offer: take a safer route through the mountains of Armenia. This path would protect his flanks, provide supplies, and, most importantly, neutralize the Parthians' greatest strength, their cavalry. The king even promised to reinforce Crassus's army with thousands of his own skilled horsemen. But Crassus, blinded by arrogance and suspecting treachery, dismissed the offer. He insisted on his own plan: a direct march across the punishing, sun-scorched plains of Mesopotamia. His own experienced officers, like his second-in-command Cassius, the same Cassius who would later assassinate Caesar, protested. They urged him to at least stick to the Euphrates River to secure their water supply. Crassus ignored them all. He had his legions, and he believed Roman might was invincible. Lured by false intelligence from a local guide secretly in the pay of the Parthians, Crassus plunged his army deep into the desert, away from water and away from safety. The Mesopotamian sun beat down relentlessly. His men, clad in heavy armor, were exhausted, dehydrated, and demoralized before they even saw the enemy. They had walked, willingly, into a trap. On June the 9th, 53 BCE, near the town of Carrhae, that trap was sprung. The army that materialized from the shimmering desert heat was nothing like what the Romans expected. Instead of a force they could overwhelm, they faced a smaller, entirely mounted army of around 10,000 men, commanded by a brilliant general named Surena. His force had two deadly parts: 1,000 heavily armored lancers called cataphracts and 9,000 lightning-fast horse archers. Crassus, baffled by this mobile army, made his next fatal error. Instead of deploying his legions in their traditional flexible lines, he ordered them into a massive hollow square. This formation offered protection, but it was slow, cumbersome, and sacrificed all mobility. On the open plain, it turned his army into a giant static target. The battle began not with a clash of swords, but with the terrifying, deafening boom of the Parthians' hollow drums. Then, Surena's horse archers began to circle the Roman square, staying just out of javelin range. They unleashed a storm of arrows unlike anything the legions had ever faced. The Parthian bow could fire arrows with enough force to pierce Roman shields and armor. The Romans held their ground, thinking the archers would eventually run out of arrows. But then they saw a sight that broke their spirit. A long train of camels behind the Parthian lines, loaded with fresh ammunition. Surena had created a mobile supply line, ensuring his archers would never run dry. The arrow storm was endless. Crassus ordered his men into the testudo, an interlocking shield wall, but this only made things worse. The formation became an oven under the desert sun, and the powerful Parthian arrows still found ways to punch through the shields. Men began collapsing from heat stroke and thirst, never even getting to fight hand to hand. In a desperate move, Crassus ordered his son, Publius, to lead a charge and break the encirclement. But this, too, was a trap. Surena's archers faked a retreat, luring Publius and his men far from the main army. Once isolated, they were surrounded and annihilated by the cataphracts. Publius, seeing no escape, chose to die by his own hand. The Romans in the square knew the charge had failed when the Parthians returned. At the tip of a long spear was the severed head of Publius Crassus, paraded for his father and the entire army to see. In that moment, Roman morale didn't just crack, it shattered. This was the turning point that sealed the fate of tens of thousands of men. Stories like this are a stark reminder of how history is shaped by singular moments and flawed decisions. If you appreciate these deep dives into the triumphs and tragedies of the ancient world, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss our next exploration. The death of his son broke Crassus. The once arrogant commander collapsed, unable to give orders. That night, under the cover of darkness, his officers Cassius and Octavius organized a desperate retreat to the nearby town of Carrhae, leaving behind some 4,000 wounded soldiers who were slaughtered by the Parthians the next morning. The retreat was a chaotic nightmare. Betrayed by yet another guide, Crassus and his remaining men were once again led astray and cornered. With his own troops on the verge of mutiny, Crassus was forced to accept an invitation from Surena to negotiate. He knew it was a trap, but he had no other choice. During the meeting, a scuffle broke out, and Crassus was killed. What happened next became a gruesome legend. Ancient historians like Cassius Dio claim the Parthians, in a final mockery of his infamous greed, poured molten gold down his throat after his death. His severed head was then sent to the Parthian king, where, according to Plutarch, it was used as a prop in a performance of a Greek tragedy. The Battle of Carrhae was an unmitigated disaster. Of the roughly 40,000 men who marched into the desert, an estimated 20,000 were killed and another 10,000 were captured. Their sacred legionary eagles, the standards of the legions, were taken as trophies. Only about 10,000 soldiers, led by Cassius, managed to escape back to Syria. The defeat at Carrhae wasn't just a military disaster, it was a political earthquake that shook the Roman Republic to its core. The death of Crassus shattered the first triumvirate, removing the crucial buffer between the two remaining titans, Caesar and Pompey. With Crassus gone, their rivalry spiraled out of control, plunging Rome into a bloody civil war that would ultimately destroy the Republic and give rise to the Roman Empire. The battle also delivered a profound psychological blow. The myth of Roman invincibility in the East was shattered, and the lost standards became a symbol of national humiliation that would haunt Rome for decades. It forced Rome to finally respect Parthia as a formidable rival, establishing a frontier that would be contested for centuries. The story of Marcus Crassus is a brutal reminder of how the ambition and ego of one man, a thirst for glory to soothe his own insecurities, could lead an empire to one of its darkest days. He marched into the desert seeking a triumph, but what he found was a death trap, a mistake paid for with the lives of 30,000 Romans and the very soul of the Republic. This is History Replay, this day